The Lives of the Saints by Father Albin, Butler. September 16th, Blessed Louis Alaman. The history of this holy prelate offers us a palpable example that the Church takes much more into account the virtues of the soul than the external actions of men, and elevates to the honor of the altars those whom she judges interiorly saints, no matter how abundant and serious the errors of attitude or judgment in their lives may appear. And thus, when the Church considers the soul of a man good and healthy, she takes his errors as if he had committed them out of ignorance or as mere mistakes of good faith. An example of this is Louis Alaman, who was born at the end of the 14th century in the Diocese of Belley. He followed the course of law at the University of Avignon and, upon graduation, also received, through the influence of his uncle, Chamberlain, at the papal court, a series of ecclesiastical benefices, an assembly that tried in vain to remedy the scandalous and terrible rivalry between the aspirants to the throne of St. Peter, the Great Western Schism, by deposing the two pontiffs, Gregory XII and Benedict XIII, and electing a third pope. In 1414, Louis was present at the meeting convened by King Sigismund and Pope John XXIII, the assembly that became the Ecumenical Council of Constance, and 2 years later he acted as vice-chamberlain in charge of the conclave that elected Pope Martin V and put an end to the Great Schism. Louis joined the court of the new pope, who appointed him Bishop of Maguelone and entrusted him with missions of great responsibility. In 1423, he was promoted to the Archbishopric of Arles, appointed governor of Romagna, Bologna, and Ravenna, and soon after, his services were recognized when he was consecrated priest cardinal of Santa Cecilia in Trastevere. However, an uprising of the Cannatoli party expelled him from Bologna, and as he was unable to reconquer the city, he retired to Rome, politically defeated. An envoy of the Order of the Teutonic Knights wrote at that time of 5 cardinals who had the best dispositions towards his order, but who did not dare to speak before the Pope except on such subjects as he wishes to hear, since the pontiff has subjugated the cardinals to such an extent that not one says a single word, except such as he wishes, and they change color when they have to speak in his audiences. Louis Alaman was one of these 5 cardinals. When Martin V died in 1431, Eugene IV, who had been Louis's predecessor as governor of Bologna, and to whom he was personally and politically antagonistic, took the see. Louis had become more and more identified with the party, which at that time had the most power and which maintained the supremacy of a general council over the Pope, and had reduced him practically to the position of a servant of that council. During the last year of his pontificate, Martin V had summoned a general council at Basel, and one of Eugene's first acts upon taking the see was to issue a bull annulling it. The few fathers who had gathered refused to separate and announced their intention to hold the assembly. Louis was then in Rome, and as his sympathies were well known, he was forbidden to leave the city. However, he ventured to attempt an escape and succeeded. At the mouth of the Tiber, he boarded a Genoese ship that took him to his episcopal see of Arles. Perhaps the purpose of this escape was to avoid being forced to declare himself openly against the Holy See in the hope that things would sort themselves out. However, in 1434, he was in Basel, where he was evidently acting as the leader of the extreme majority that was in opposition to Cardinal Cesarini, the Pope's representative, since by then Eugene had already rescinded his decree of dissolution. The anti-papal activities of the council became so strong that in 1437 the Pope himself was summoned to appear before the assembly to answer the charges. The pontiff refused and ordered the council to reconvene in Ferrara. Cardinal Cesarini and his followers complied and departed for Ferrara, leaving an illegal assembly in Basel under the deft leadership of Cardinal Louis Alaman. In 1493, that council went so far as to declare Eugene deposed in view of his opposition to the assembly, and to elect Amadeus of Savoy in his place, as Felix V, the last of the anti-popes. The principal actor in that play was Cardinal Allemand, with the collaboration of only 11 bishops, and it was Louis himself who consecrated Amadeus of Savoy a bishop and crowned him pope. The following year, Eugene IV declared Louis Alaman excommunicated and deprived him of his cardinalate. Now it cannot be doubted that many of the members of the conciliar party were sincerely animated by the desire to improve the conditions of the Church by the hope of converting those who were in error, and by the spirit of restoring peace and unity. Nor must it be supposed that Blessed Louis was the only good man who was gravely mistaken as to the harsh methods to be employed in order to obtain the ends pursued. For a long time, Louis had the support of the wise and just Cardinal Nicholas of Cusa, as well as that of Aeneas Silvius Piccolomini, then a layman and certainly no saint, but he went on to become Pope Pius II. The Council, after its period of rebellious assembly, discussed the doctrine of the Immaculate Conception of Our Lady, and, with the vigorous participation of Blessed Louis Alaman, eventually declared that the dogma was in accord with the Catholic faith, with worship, with good sense, and the Holy Scriptures. There was a time when Basel was stricken by the scourge of an epidemic, and Cardinal Allemand was the first to organize aid for the victims and to encourage the other bishops to join him in administering the sacraments to the sick and dying. All this time he ignored the excommunication that Pope Eugene had pronounced against him and put all his zeal at the service of anti-Pope Felix. But in 1447, Pope Eugene died, and anti-Pope Felix expressed his desire to resign in favor of the legally elected Nicholas V. Nicholas then made a magnanimous gesture in favor of peace and revoked all suspensions, excommunications, and other penalties incurred by the anti-pope, the recalcitrant members of the council, and their sympathizers. Thus, Blessed Louis was restored to his cardinal dignity. He was deeply repentant for the part he had played in pushing the Church into schism and retired to his see of Arles, where he quietly spent the remaining year of his life in the exercise of prayer and penance, which he had always practiced in private. His mortal remains were buried in the church of St. Trophimus, where his tomb was the scene of many miracles. The cult, which began after his death, was approved by Pope Clement VII in 1527. The feast of Blessed Louis Alaman is celebrated in several dioceses in the south of France.